Yes.
Donahue,
Yes.
Goods,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Combs,
Yes.
and Harden.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, great. And the next item we have on our agenda is the City of Tampa's agreement with Florida Housing Coalition. And I sent a copy to you not long after our meeting. Does everyone have the copy of the agreement?
Do you know the date that would have been sent?
I beg your pardon?
The date it would have been sent?
Mr. Rosenwasser, it should have been sent on August the 13th.
Thank you.
So Natasha, that is the COT, Florida Housing Coalition Consulting Agreement?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right, great. I just found it too. Thank you.
And so did everybody have a chance to read over this agreement? It kind of gives an idea of what the City of Tampa is doing in Florida Housing Coalition, providing consulting services for them to look at a path to creating a CLT.
Cheryl, this is Sarah. I thought it was really helpful to review this consultant service agreement, and specifically, you know, on page 15, the scope of work deliverables. That's what I thought was the most helpful. Is, you know, all the same questions that I think that this committee has had is, you know, recommendations on board compensation, staffing needs, appropriation bylaws, ground lease terms, resale provisions, CLT home buyer education, system for transferring properties, handling real property taxes. You know, it goes on and on and on, but those are all of the specific deliverables that Florida Housing Coalition is going to, you know, work with the City of Tampa through. And I think it's exactly what this committee, this board is in need of, is to kind of go through this process. I was trying to think about, you know, our meeting and what specifically, you know, was going to be the action of this committee. And I just don't think that we're at a position where we're able to really give you know, a direct action, just because there's so much stuff to look at. And, you know, based on not really understanding specifically how, you know, the county operates, and there's a lot of questions around that piece. I think it would be super helpful if we were able to bring on, you know, an organization or a group that can kind of help us answer all of these questions before we just decide on something.
Right. And so that's kind of two different things there. So being able to get some guidance on it is one thing, but being able to go into agreement with an organization has a monetary impact, which means that, you know, is there a budget? Are there funds set aside for that? And, you know, is that something that has to go back to the AHAB at large? It's not anything that should be held in the subcommittee. It probably needs to go back to the entire AHAB board, and then that has to go to the board because it has a fiscal impact to it. So just go, you know, we can't just operate within the subcommittee and say, well, we're going to acquire the services of a consultant or FHC to be able to do this. So I had spoken to Jamie Ross about this before they even went into the agreement with the city of Tampa. But right now, what we're looking at, whether or not we are going to move forward, because the city of Tampa has already made a decision that they were going to move forward the CLT being under the auspices of the city. And so right now, the discussion where we last left off was whether or not the CLT would be county-led or we would move forward with a separate nonprofit entity. And so whatever decision is made, or whatever recommendation is made, then the work has to be done based on that, because that changes. So the deliverables would change if it was a nonprofit. So some of the things that that the county government would be subject to, the nonprofit would not be subject to that.
Right. So I guess our first question would be, can we even entertain a conversation in regards to bringing on a consultant to help us through this process? Is that something that we can entertain to bring to AHAB? And that would be a question for you, Cheryl. I have no idea if there's funding that would be, I know funding's tight, of course, and I don't know where this funding would fall under. I mean, is that something that is a realistic, is it realistic for us to have that conversation, or is it, there's no funding for it, so we might as well move on from that?
Mm-hmm. What I can say is that with the local funding, we didn't have a line item, or we didn't have provisions in there for any type of services. So we did attempt to have that as a part of it, but I want to say that was not included. And at this particular time, all of the funds are encumbered.
Chair, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I think what I hear Ms. Combs mentioning, this is Commissioner Overman, is that, based on the prior conversations and based on within this subcommittee, the issues associated with the flexibility associated with a nonprofit versus having it government-led or having it county-led is one issue that had not been, as best I could tell, decided yet. But it did sound like at the last meeting that there was some interest in going the nonprofit route, and I'm not sure why, but I do appreciate that was a leaning that I think I heard. The other thing that is taken into consideration is that the housing trust that's established does not preclude the establishment of a land trust. So the Hillsborough County Housing Trust, of which the county has made a commitment of $10 million each year, does have, although it may have been already budgeted for this year, does have the capacity for helping it getting the land trust up and running. And it has the capacity for purchasing land. It's not precluded from that, if I'm not mistaken. Cheryl, is that accurate?
I want to say it wasn't excluded from it, but I want to I kind of want to punt this over to Nancy and ask, was it included? So I know that the service dollars wasn't included for, because then this would be sort of an administrative function to find out which direction to go to create the land trust. So this would be sort of kind of like pre-development. So Nancy?
Yeah, I think the funds certainly could be used for land acquisition.
Right.
So I'd have to look at it more closely in terms of whether the funds could be used for retaining FHC or some other entity for consulting purposes. I Didn't we, Cheryl, use FHC for capacity building with Hope
We did.
funds?
We did, and that was before it became the Hope Funds, and that was on the first 5 million. But after we got everything formalized, then there was not any service money included in there. That's why we had to go back to the board to get service money for that Tampa Park project.
Right.
Right, and that was a specific action.
Okay.
So ultimately, this committee, if I'm understanding correctly, the process and the decisions that are necessary, it sounds as though, one, we have to decide what direction we go with the mission of this committee, which is to come up with a strategy for adopting a community land trust program. And the value of having something mirrored with what the city has done is if it's like to like, where we can partner with the city on so many of our affordable housing options, having it be similar in structure and utilizing the same consultant, given that they're a rock star group of people that I happen to have spoken to on numerous bases, and I could speak to that they are really good at what they do. And they have helped the housing department before, have helped us before in our work. So they're clearly very qualified. It's just whether or not we're going to suggest that our committee can make a recommendation to find a nonprofit organization or to found a nonprofit organization to do this outside of the county. And my question to the committee for consideration is, and maybe for Nancy, because Nancy, I think you need to help me with this question, is if we were to start out with a county-led community land trust with a goal of distributing it out to a nonprofit organization at some point in time, maybe like we did with Safe and Sound, for example, as an organization that started out in the county and now is sort of on its own. And I don't have the full roadmap on that particular organization, but it is now a nonprofit that actually works in our county, and we partner and help fund to some degree, but they are able to partner with the community for other resources. But by seeding the community, and SEED, the community land trust through the county in a similar fashion, we may be able to find some collaborative work that we can do not only with the city, but with a longer term goal of possibly creating the opportunities that are made by a separate nonprofit agency. I will, and that's where I'm trying to figure out, is that something that could happen? Or would we be precluded from, say, for example, distributing it out to a separate nonprofit organization down the road if we were able to get one started under a similar type of arrangement that the city has organized?
I think that can happen, and one of the other things that I think I may be able to do is see where FHC is with deliverables with the city of Tampa, right? So I'll contact Vanessa and see if she's gotten any information from FHC yet, see where they are and what she is willing to share with me so that I can bring it back to the subcommittee and share it with you guys. And so I just want to say we do that all the time. So when I get information over and it's for a similar type project, I share that information with the city of Tampa, and that would eliminate the need for us to go into some type of agreement prematurely while we're still trying to figure out what we're recommending, and be able to look at some deliverables within a scenario that's similar to where you're trying to go to.
And I also,
Harden,
go ahead.
Adam Harden, I'd like to be recognized when I may.
Who's speaking?
I think it's Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Sarah, will you recognize Adam, please?
I'm not, am I leading the meeting? I'm sorry, I got on a little late.
I thought you were chair of the committee.
That's what, Carol, am I leading the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, Adam, you're recognized.
Thank you. So good discussions, and I've enjoyed I to some extent, there's two comments that I want to make here. One is I'm not sure, I participated in a couple of the city's calls. I'm not sure our goals are necessarily the same as theirs, where a lot of the surplus property they have are small single-family residential spot lots, and you know, the concept of
Adam, you're
Adam,
cutting
you're
out.
cutting in and out. We can't hear you.
I'm sure he just had an alert. Is he calling from his phone? Yeah.
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
Now we can. Go ahead.
Hello? Okay. Yeah, sorry, I started getting an Amber Alert. So the concern is you know, as we discussed through this, it's kind of like I have done several environmental mitigation projects, and ultimately those have to be turned over to a nature conservancy to manage in perpetuity. So we're talking about a land trust, but pretty similar transaction. But the transaction is, you know, the plan is made as a plan, and then the entity is either created or found and contracted with to fit the need of the plan, not vice versa. So, you know, and some of the concerns I have here are, you know, like if the county has, and I don't know, but if they have, say, a larger tract of land that they would like to put into a tax credit development or that type thing, that this form of ownership of a community land trust may not work with that capital stack, with that financing. So I guess it's informative for the committee to also know, like, what are we trying to accomplish? I mean, there's a certain list of surplus properties, and the goal would be for this entity to, you know, to take title to those properties and then administer them in accordance with certain terms that the commission agrees to at the point that they give title over to this entity. I mean, what is it that we're seeking to accomplish, and what is the property that we're seeking to accomplish it on, or at least the initial tranche of property look like? Therefore, what, you know, what would the expected development on that property look like, so that we could all kind of think out loud about then what type of a land trust structure would be appropriate for it. So to me, that's kind of been the disconnect here, is like a little bit of the cart before the horse. You know, I think the entity can easily take the form we need. And then I guess to Kim's comments, Commissioner Overman's comments, I would, about whether it would be a private not-for-profit or not. I mean, if it's, you know, no more than a land trust in name and a subcommittee of AHAB, or AHAB in its function, or another committee appointed by the county, then the county still just owns the property, right? At some point, if the county decides to transfer the property under the public procurement laws that cover the disposition of surplus property, then I would think that has to be a legal person. It has to be an entity, an LLC. It could be a private not-for-profit, whose board could be appointed by the government, as in the case of the streetcar board that I serve on, or it could be a private not-for-profit whose board is, you know, appointed some other way. So, but, you know, I would think at the point that this thing wants to take title to property and administer property, own property, that it would have to be a legal entity, and one would assume it would be a not-for-profit. But, you know, how, I mean, its board would probably be county appointed, right? That would make perfect sense. Just like the streetcar board is appointed by the county and and the city. It's a private not-for-profit that owns the streetcar assets. Anyway, so I'll shut up, and I hope that all makes sense, but I just guess it'd be, better, it would be good for the committee in parallel to doing the public records request from the city and getting their consulting documents. It would be good for us to know what is the list of properties we believe would be administered by a land trust, and what are our goals, are being the county's goals for the development of that property. So I'll shut up. Thanks.
Yeah, so Adam, one of the things that was discussed previously was whether or not they wanted the CLT to be a nonprofit or a separate nonprofit or fall within the county. So most of the conversation really was surrounded by the support of a separate nonprofit. That was my take on it. And so then the other question that came up was, how would that nonprofit be supported physically over time during the early stages of the CLT? Would need to have some financial support in order to be successful. And so that was a conversation I believe that was had on our last meeting. And yes, Cherie, I'm sorry.
Yes, that brings up a question for me. When the county decided to go with FHC, had they already entertained the nonprofit versus the consultant? Was that a discussion with the BOCC? I mean, with the city of Tampa?
I'm not sure.
Because FHC is coming with a $25,000 fee, which I'm guessing they'll earn it. Okay, I haven't seen anything that they've done that wasn't, worth theirs. They've got their act together, but I'm sure that there's still going to be a city of Tampa employees who have to manage this for the city. So I guess that kind of threw me, because I was thinking that we were looking at a nonprofit that was already doing this and pairing with them if we went in that direction. I haven't made up my mind as to how I need to, I need definitely more information as to whether or not we can handle it. I mean, you've said several times that being part of government comes with certain restrictions, and being a nonprofit frees you up. But, I don't know which one gets the job done, since the property belongs to the county and they already have ownership of all that property. So
I just want to say that if it's conveyed over to a nonprofit, then it becomes theirs with certain stipulations. And so then it no longer belongs to the county, but then there are certain provisions that have to be made. I did have early conversations about existing nonprofits that may or could do it. And so what happens with that is we got a number of different nonprofit housing developers within the county, but can they realistically own that property and not compete? And so it would other nonprofits at a disadvantage is trying to do projects as well. True. And so then, and is there a nonprofit that's available that would administer the CLT without competing? And so that's a question to be had as well.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Can I ask a question? I'm wondering whether from the models you've looked at, do CLTs generate an income stream? In other words, is it typical for a CLT to have a percentage of sales, or because in terms of how you would sustain a nonprofit, I assume that if you're developing these lands, that there's some income generated and that part of that feeds into keep sustaining the nonprofit.
There is some fees that's generated within those projects, and so for the most part, the CLTs that we've had an opportunity to look at have been single family. And so even when Sean came on and he shared, and he's a CLT guru within Florida Housing. When he shared, most of what he talked about had to do with single family. It's very, very difficult to do the multifamily. And so for a nonprofit that's just starting out, they would look at the single family model initially. Some fees are earned, but it would take a while before that CLT would be able to sustain itself. And that's why, realistically, I suggested that there would have to be some financial support to that nonprofit to operate as CLT so that it can sustain over time until it can generate enough fees on its own.
And what is the reason that these CLTs typically are only single-family detached?
The real purpose behind it is really to be able to sustain some level of affordability in an area that may be gentrified, sometimes in perpetuity, but sometimes for 50 years, sometimes for 30 years. And so that was one of the reasons that
do typical multifamily financing structures even allow for leased land?
Not typically, no.
All right, thank you.
Although Bright Communities does have a townhome development in Dunedin, I believe. So that's sort of multifamily. It's not rental, but it's not detached.
Townhomes, but townhomes are still a single family form of ownership, deeded to the ground, separated by 2-hour construction, but understood.
Right, and I want to say the development of that began when Anthony heading up the HFA as well. So in his vision on CLTs may be a little bit different than what the current director's vision is on it. So let me just add that. And so really
Does anyone else have any other questions? I don't know.
I have another question.
You're recognized, Commissioner Oberman.
Thank you. We have better connection here. What if this the county level CLT took in the surplus properties from the county, because there are many of them, and most of them do appear to be single family, and funded the CLT enough with the sale of the land after it's already been rezoned as permanently affordable housing. And what that does is that makes the land cost more amenable to the builder or the developer of the property, because they don't pay long-term taxes on the land portion of the deal, because the rezoning has to be done by the county anyway, correct?
No, not necessarily.
Okay. How does that happen?
And so if we have a property that goes out for RFP, then it's included in the RFP. So we got several properties right now that will go out for an RFP. within those specific properties, there is an opportunity for developers to come in and have it rezoned based on specific needs of a project. If the county does it, then that becomes more of a use type function, not necessarily an affordable housing function. And if we start disposing of lands other than to nonprofits, that is a real estate function. And so we can't just sell off the lands to a private developer because of the laws that we have to abide by.
Hey, David, could you mute your mic for me for a sec?
Sure. Oh, I'm on mute.
You are. Well, I can, there you are. Now you are. Uh-oh, now you disappeared. No, that wasn't the plan.
And so that was part of the beauty in transferring the land over to a separate nonprofit, because then they're not bound by those same the same set of conveyance issues that we face.
Okay.
This is complicated.
Yeah.
It's so complicated. That's why I truly feel that we're moving forward a little too fast. There's so many pieces to it that you think you have an idea of where you want to go with it, and then something else pops in, and then you rethink everything. And so making that decision, whether it be county-led or a nonprofit, I just don't think that we're in the position where we have enough knowledge or understanding the purpose and the goals of what we're trying to achieve in order to make that decision. And so I'm trying to figure out what motion needs to come from this committee to the AHAB committee. And I truly feel that we need a consultant to come in and kind of help us with this process. I just don't see, because this isn't my subject matter expert. I don't feel like I'm a subject matter expert at this. And so I feel like bringing in someone that can help us answer those questions and formulate a really good strategy and a plan in order to determine if it's going to be a nonprofit, if we want to hand it off to a nonprofit, if we want to keep it under the county, and what kind of benefits are, weigh the strengths and the weaknesses on each of those sides, I think would help us move through this process. I just don't see any other way to really feel like this committee can get the education that they need in order to make these informed decisions without bringing someone in to kind of help us through this process. Anybody else have any other suggestions other than that?
No,
Maybe
I don't.
that can be the recommendation.
Sherry, go ahead.
I don't think we need to take a motion to say that we aren't ready. I think that's simply your report, that unless you're asking for the funding for a consultant, and then that's another whole issue. But you're right. Every time someone asks a question, there's this aha, oh, I hadn't thought of that moment. And I'm definitely not ready to make a choice between the two. The question would be, who can we afford to consult with? Those consulting dollars are usually, I don't know where that comes from. I'm guessing it comes out of Cheryl's pocket somehow.
Madam Chair.
Yes, I'm not sure who's on the call, but you're recognized.
Councilman Gooch.
Yes, Councilman.
A while back, didn't you have a gentleman come in and talk about land trust?
Yes, we had Sean Nesbitt from Florida Housing Coalition gave us a brief overview on it.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we reach out to him or that organization and figure out who can really give sound advice, or some of the questions that the board is asking to clarify and see the direction you need to go, versus going out right now and spending money for a consultant? Maybe they have some of the answers that we're already asking to be able to come back to give proper details of how we need to proceed. I think if that's the will of everyone, if there are questions, have Ms. Howell go back and say, we need more information. Can you bring us back more information?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I think that myself being in the position that I'm in, I honestly don't know even some of the questions that we need to be asking in order to get that kind of response. And I think that's the struggle that I'm having, is trying to determine all the areas that we really need to be looking at and what are those questions that we need to be asking ourselves in order to really formulate, you know, what are the goals of the committee? What is the end goal of this? And I'm trying to figure out what are those questions that we even need to be asking in order for us to come to a consensus where we feel that we have enough knowledge and understanding to be able to kind of get from where we are, the data gathering and the information gathering, to the point of where we can make a recommendation of, you know, this is how we move forward. I'm in the position where I feel like we still need more education and knowledge. Does anyone else have any specific pointed questions that we could seek to get clarification on? That could definitely be a starting point to help.
Chair, can I offer a little bit of guidance?
Sure.
Okay, so the COT Florida Housing MOU, it looks like they've agreed with Councilman Good's source, which was Cody and Ashen Nesbitt, who work with the Florida Housing Coalition. And if you look at the scope of work that the city has designed with the Florida Housing Coalition, it is, and I don't know that it precludes the city actually being the CLT, but it is setting the groundwork for creating a CLT. For example, item number 10 on the scope of services offered by Florida Housing Coalition in the MOU is recommendation on funding needed for the CLT to operate. It's down the list. It's down the list on board composition, staffing needs, and it doesn't necessarily in this scope address the issues on whether or not it's city-led or nonprofit-led, but it does answer all of the concerns I think I've just heard in the sense of how do we develop a system for transferring the properties? How do we determine the resale provisions? How do we understand the ground lease arrangements and what is the best piece of property that the CLT might own or transfer that would go with the property if it were either owned by the trust or ultimately sold out of the trust as a consequence of the of RFP that was offered to a builder. What kind of staff would be necessary to meet the needs of a CLT? Whether or not that could be met under the county's budget or whether it would need to set the parameters for a nonprofit to be able to operate with possible county support in certain elements of the CLT land that could possibly be funded with surplus lands that the county owns. Not exclusively, but as a supplement to other lands that could be contributed for one reason or another to a CLT. How to handle the property taxes. I mean, all of the items that are listed under the scope of services that the MOU that's put together with the professionals we've relied on in the past for guidance are addressed there. My question is, are we interested in trying to figure out how to set up a similar type of MOU, and what resources could we ask the Affordable Housing Advisory Board to consider recommending to the Board of County Commissions for funding? Because last I checked, very few of us work for free. And while the folks at the Florida Housing Coalition do actually do a lot of consulting with us, we haven't asked them to do this work. And we've got an idea of the range of what the organization has suggested it will take for them to really commit to helping the city do it. Do we believe that it would be in the similar range if we were asked for a similar list of services to be provided to us to help in moving this effort forward? And I'll stop there.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I believe I was a couple of weeks ago, Carol Post did bring my council a issue in reference to this land trust and their explanation. Now, my understanding is, if I'm staying corrected, but I believe I am, that they're going to go under this one Tampa program of the city, and I believe that they're doing it as a nonprofit. I think that's how they kind of run that land trust, I believe, under the one Tampa concept that they've been doing some of these other activities with. It's a nonprofit. So that kind of answers the nonprofit aspect of your question. I think the city developed this one Tampa as the nonprofit. So maybe Ms. Howell, maybe get Vanessa, get a little clarification on that, bring back to it. But I believe they're going to be doing it under the one Tampa program.
Councilman Goods, you're correct. I read that in the proposal as well, and thought that was an interesting structure that they had. You know, I think that we're all kind of pointing back to the same thing, and I mean, I think it's up for the discussion to recommend that we bring forward a recommendation to the AHAB to reach out to Florida Housing Coalition to obtain a proposal for creating a community land trust. I think that that's in the best interest of everyone to get some guidance on how we move forward. And you know, obviously, a lot of the proposal that the city has created with Florida Housing Coalition outlines the steps that we need to take. I see there's a few missing that we'd want to add in, specifically around looking at, you know, standing up a nonprofit or going with an external nonprofit. But there certainly can be, you know, additions added to that. But that would be my recommendation that we take to the AHAB board, and then we can we can have further discussion with them in regards to if we are able to, you know, seek out a proposal and find out what that fiscal amount would be, and then bring that back and figure out what kind of channels we can take to be able to obtain the funding, whether it be in the housing budget or if we have to look elsewhere. But I think that would be a start for us. Anyone have any conversation around that?
No, I agree.
All right, so I'm going to make that motion. My recommendation is to reach out to the Florida Housing Coalition to obtain a proposal for creating a community land trust. That will be the motion that we will take to the AHAB. Can I get a second?
Second.
Is the motion to reach out to them, or is the motion to bring it to the AHAB to reach out to them?
To bring it to the AHAB to seek approval in reaching out to Florida Housing Coalition. All right, so I've moved it. Sherry seconded.
Point of order.
Yes,
I
sir.
believe that the chairwoman has to pass the gavel to the vice chair to make the motion. Is that correct, City Attorney?
Sorry, that is correct.
Okay, so
I
I'll
don't
make
have a vice chair.
right, and I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll make the motion that we move to request that the AHAB board consider consulting with Florida Housing Coalition for the development of a community land trust and request a proposal to support our efforts in establishing a community land trust, however that comes to pass.
I'll second the motion so we can, I'd like to be recognized.
All right, thank you, Adam. You've seconded that motion. So it's been properly moved by Commissioner Overman and seconded by Adam Harden. All those in favor?
Wait, you might want to ask for discussion.
Oh, discussion?
I'd like to ask discussion.
Okay, go ahead, Adam.
So as a friendly amendment, I mean, I would suggest that we just solicit a proposal and take it to the full board for discussion rather than have the discussion about soliciting a proposal. But anyway, I'll support either.
I'm not opposed to the motion. I mean, to the amendment.
The board doesn't, I just think for clarification, so the AHAB board doesn't do proposals or requests for proposals? So I'm not sure that they have the authority to do the request for proposals. And so typically the board advises staff, and then staff will go through the proper motions, and then the request for proposal goes to procurement.
The wheels of government.
Well, you know, under the circumstances, it would probably be a sole source RFP.
Yeah.
Given Florida law and the Florida Housing Coalition's position. But so, I mean, procurement would make that decision, obviously, but under the circumstances, I think procurement would probably go with the sole source request for proposal or request for RFQ, request for court or a quote. But I would accept the amendment.
Any other further discussion? All right, Commissioner Overman, can you restate your amended motion?
So the amended motion is to recommend to the AHAB board that they go through the process of asking staff to request a consultancy arrangement in an effort to move forward a community land trust. Is Cheryl, does that work?
Second.
That does work.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Overman. I heard a second. Adam, was that you?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion?
No.
All right. All those in favor? All those approve?
Aye.
Right.
Do we need to take a formal?
Point of order. You got to take a roll call vote.
Yeah, I think you should do a roll call.
Yeah, that's fun. Does Natasha do that?
Yes, I was just waiting for some of the sound to go down, but yes, I can go ahead and call the roll for your official vote. Overman,
Yes.
Rosenwasser,
Yes.
Boots,
Yes.
Hollis,
Yes.
Hardin,
Yes.
Holmes, Powell,
Yes.
Donahue.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Woohoo! Well, I'm excited about that. All right, I'll try to contain my excitement while we move on to the next item.
And I'm going to need to jump off at 2:30.
Okay. Thank
Do
you
we
for
have
letting
any?
us know that.
Do we have any actionable items we need to do where I would make the quorum, or do we have sufficient quorum for today?
It's my understanding we
Sufficient
just
quorum.
have the future business items and adjournment left on the agenda.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So any other future business items for the good of the committee?
It's just nice that we've taken steps to get further direction and move in the right direction.
Sarah, I want to say one of
Chair, there's one item I would like to add to future business items on everyone's list. For those of you that were registered to the conference last week, I believe there was a session on CLTs. And if you haven't listened to it yet, please make sure that you do. I know I'm going to go back and listen to many of the sessions. It was kind of crazy to try and catch them all in the middle of a board week. But I encourage the entire committee to actually go back and listen to that before the next, that one section that is on CLTs before our next AHAB meeting. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Overman. It was really good too. So it's on demand now, so anyone can do that.
Excellent.
And
Thank
Sarah,
you.
Yeah, the only other thing I want to add is that Nancy and I need to look at a source of funding where that, and so if it's included in the plan or not, or what kind of flexibility is there.
Thank you, Cheryl. We appreciate that very much. All right, any other items for future business? All right, hearing none, I'd like a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
All right, Sherry moves to adjourn. We get a second.
I'll second that.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Overman. Thank you guys all for the call today. Really excited about moving forward in a more formalized process and looking forward to seeing how it goes. Everyone have a wonderful week.
All right.
See you next
Thank
Monday.
you, guys. Have a good day.